Hello and welcome to the tutorial video for Exercise C, MS Project Basics, Part 2. This is the new wine brand exercise. As you open up the PDF or PowerPoint slides to follow along in this tutorial, you're going to see that the first thing we learn is our project got funded. So we had estimated how much the project would cost and how long it would take, how much labor it would take. We presented that to the executive committee and they bit. They liked it, they decided it was worth it, and they decided they would go ahead and fund our project. Now, when this kind of thing happens, it means that we got to go back and become more detailed and be sure of how long things will take, what's really going to happen. Our prior project plan was just a sketch. We've got some more detail to add. Another thing is the CEO externally may have come up with some determination. We had said we could be done by, say, September. And the CEO may come in and say, well, okay, that means you can begin a little later. And so instead of whenever we had said March 1st, he says, well, actually, you're going to start on March 15th because we have a bit of a monetary problem, cash flow wise. So the first thing you want to do is you come in here to the project information and set the start date of your project to 3/15/15. So I'm going to go ahead and do that so that I've got that there. I don't have to think about it again. Going forward, I can see that after I went as the project manager and discussed the project again with the various stakeholders, I collected a bunch of information into an Excel spreadsheet. Now you can go ahead and open up the Exercise C Setup Excel spreadsheet and you will see that information. I've got it open here. So you can see there are two tabs. There's one for resources and there's one for tasks. So if I come over to the resources tab, I can see that it's got a couple of material and cost, new resources down here we didn't see before. Because we learned that, yes, we're going to need grapes, for example. Okay, well, that makes sense. It's going to be $15,000 worth of grapes that we're going to cost to this project when they get used. And then bottles are going to cost us $3,500, bottles and labels, and we're going to use the filter machine, and at some point we're going to cost that to the project as well. So we've taken this information from Microsoft Project, pasted it into Excel and updated it, and now we'll learn that we can actually take it back to a Microsoft Project and paste it in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole resource sheet. I'm going to go over to my blank project in Microsoft Project, click on the resource tab, go down to the resource sheet, and I can go ahead. Let me make sure. You got to make sure you've aligned it. I'm starting in the resource name column, name, type, material label, initials. All of that has to be in order. And if I'm on the default resource sheet view, I can come in here and hit paste. And it should paste in precisely. Now it has to be exactly lined up, and in this case it is. And everything pasted in, and that makes me happy. That was quick and easy. All right, so that's one of the first learnings we're getting in this exercise, is that we can use Microsoft Excel to make our life a little easier. We've pasted in the resources. Now we're going to go and paste in the tasks. So I'm going to go back over here. Now this doesn't work quite as easily. So in this case, pasting in task names, durations, all these pieces, you can't just paste them all in at once. If you do, you will find out that the order in which they get pasted in makes a big difference. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the names to begin with, and I'm going to go back over to my Gantt chart, and I'm going to paste my task names starting on the top. Let's go ahead and hit paste. Now notice I don't have my project summary task turned on yet. We'll do that in a little while. Now, tasks are manually scheduled. I actually want to go ahead and change all of these to auto-scheduled. Otherwise, later on, it's not going to automatically build my Gantt chart, which I want. And one of the reasons I want that is I want to notice right now that these tasks, which are subtasks of the planning stage, are not indented. So I actually want to go ahead and indent those and turn this into a summary task. So I want to make sure I go ahead and fix this problem right now. And I'll go ahead and just do that. So that all my summary tasks are correct. And once they're correct, I can fold them down so that they all fit inside. Sure enough, all done. Okay. All right, so now we have another problem we need to remember. St. Patrick's Day is a non-working day. So before we get to too much auto-scheduling, we actually need to go back and change the working time in our calendar. And we need to remember that March 16th, which is going to be our St. Patrick's Day, is going to be non-working. So that's all I have to do is just go to March 16th, put in an exception, and hit OK, and it will notice now that this is an exception and March 16th is non-working. And that'll change how my dates work. Notice everything now moves to the 17th. Okay, let's keep moving. Now durations, we're going to paste in the durations, and these are going to paste just fine. So I'm going to go back over to Microsoft Excel, and I'm going to grab the durations. Now these durations are entered in weeks. Weeks. Let's go back over here. These are entered in days. So if I really want these to paste correctly, I actually have to go back to the change working time, click on options, and put that durations are entered in weeks by default. If I don't do that, I'm going to end up with a problem. So now I can come in here and paste. And when I do that, you'll see that it puts weeks rather than days. And when I scroll down now, where these zeros are, I can see I've got milestones. These little diamonds show up, special symbols. That's excellent. So let's keep going. So I'm going to go back over. I've got my non-working time. I've got my durations. It's time for the predecessors. If I've done everything in order, I can paste the predecessors in just fine. So now I'm going to come in here, go back up to the top, and paste the predecessor numbers. And as that happens, I'm seeing my Gantt chart build. I'm going to go ahead and zoom my Gantt chart to the entire project just so I can get a view. Sure enough, it's looking good. I can see how everything is cascading down to the end. I don't see anything disconnected. Perfect. I can see that there seems to be set up the handling process. Starts out kind of separate here. And I suppose that's okay, right? That can happen at the same time that some of this early stuff is happening. So I'm sort of double checking and error checking as I go through here. I'm going to go back over to the Excel sheet. Effort driven. So effort driven type resource initials. Let's go back over and take a look for a second. we have resource names up here, not initials. We don't have any effort driven. We don't have any type column. But it turns out we can get it. So we can come in here and we can rename this one, and we can pick up the resource initials column. I have to do that if I'm going to paste the initials. But the good news is I can paste the initials. If everything was set up correctly, if I've got my resource sheet in already and the initials match, I can now come in here and I can paste. And when I do that, look at the names showing up out here. Everything is lining up. Now I want to go ahead and go back and check real quick. I'm going to go back over to the resource sheet, and I'm going to make sure that no extra stuff showed up below line 11. If I got any of the initials wrong, I would see some little ghost resources showing up right now. But because I don't see any, it's telling me that everything is set up right. The pasting worked, and I'm happy. Now this effort-driven column, let's try that out. Here's the effort-driven column. The effort-driven column is all in spelled out yeses and nos. And so I'm going to try that out. Now that I've got this column turned on, I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to paste that in. Now notice I pasted resource initials first. That doesn't matter that much. That particular thing doesn't matter so much. And what's happened here is we've determined that certain tasks are effort-driven. So if we add more people to them or reduce the number of people, the amount of time the task takes will decrease or increase. That's good. In which case, we know, exactly how long a task is going to take. Some tasks aren't like that. Some tasks, for example, are more time delimited. They're duration-based tasks where no matter how much time you allot, it takes a month for the grapes to ferment. No matter how many people you put on that task, you can't speed it up. So that's not an effort-driven task. Now this type column, again, if I've got the text in here exactly right, in the format that Microsoft Project is used to seeing, I can copy, I can bring it over. I've got to start at the place where Microsoft Project starts. So if I go over here, I see that Microsoft Project is starting up at the top. I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to paste, and automatically, Microsoft Project makes a determination that if anything is fixed duration inside of a summary task, it will automatically populate that with fixed duration. So it's done that for me automatically, and it has made the changes to tasks 4, 9, 15, and 19. If I go back over here, I can see that task 4, 9, 15, and 19. Notice I've got one extra line up here at the top, so I'm having to subtract one each time. Those are the ones that should have changed to fixed duration, and sure enough, I can error check and look over here on project, and I see that those changes have happened and they are highlighted in blue. Now I still don't see the summary here as far as when this project's going to be done, and I want to see that. And so I want to know when my project is going to end. And I haven't yet seen that. So let's go back over here to turn on our project summary task, which is, let's see here, the summary. Now I'm blanking for a moment. There it is. On the Format tab, I'm going to turn on line 0, the project summary task. And I can see that I've got a bit of a problem because we're not finishing now until December 21st. We want a holiday wine, and so we obviously have a problem here. Okay, let's come back and add in our project name and some of these other elements. So under project, I'm going to go ahead and project information. Oh, sorry, that's not where I'm going to go ahead and just save my file actually. Let's put a save on here. And it's asking save at browse documents. I'll put it on the desktop for the moment. And I'll just save it as my last name plus new wine brand part 2 exercise C. And I'll go ahead and save that. And I see that now up in line 0. And I have set up my project. I've got the new information in there. I've got the different types of tasks. We've now figured out, which ones need to be fixed work. I can see that I'm not done until 12/21/15. We're on slide 14 there of the project sheet. And we basically have our updated plan. Now, we've got a problem, obviously. We're not finishing until December, and we're going to have to start fixing that problem, which is going to be a challenge. So let's just see if there's enough slack. See, I can see like these little dotted lines, a split task here. I can see that I may be able to force Microsoft Project to schedule the work within available slack. So I'm going to try to do that first. And if that works, then we're going to get our deadline here, this 12/21/15, to finish on time. So let's just see if we can force it. Let's go down here to Product Review Complete. Here it is, our milestone. I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to see that it's possible to set a constraint on this task. So I can try to say finish no later than, and right here we can actually change this to November 13th, which we've determined is the latest that we can actually finish and still get our product on the shelves in time for the holiday season. So if I try this, it's telling me this constraint is going to result in a scheduling conflict, which is to say, maybe Fred or Helmut or somebody is going to be fully allocated at the same time that 2 tasks need to be done. And they're not going to be able to have this person work on both. Well, I want that conflict to happen because I want to see where the problem is and see if there's a way for me to fix it. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and hit continue, and I'm going to hit OK. And then it's going to say again, are you sure? There's a scheduling conflict. Something can't move. The constraint cannot be set. I'm going to hit continue, allow the scheduling conflict. I want to see where this conflict is. Alright, so I've set this constraint. Let's go back over to the resource sheet. And when I come over here, at the moment, I don't see where this problem is happening. If I come back over here, I don't see any little red exclamation points showing up telling me there's a problem. I do see down here that the constraint has been set. But nothing has been rescheduled. So while that has been moved, I can see that these two are not going to work together. Alright, let's see if there's another way we can force this to move. If I go down and let's try this time, let's try the next task up. Let's go with number 24 here. And I'm going to try to do the same thing. I'm going to go back into advanced and I'm going to say, constraint type, finish no later than, and we're going to set that constraint date again to November 13th. And I'm going to hit OK. It's going to tell me the same thing. I'm going to set the constraint. And now it's telling me it's got some problems. Various overallocations. So, to continue leveling other allocated resources, click Skip. To continue leveling and skip overallocations that cannot be resolved, skip all. So I'm going to go ahead and skip all here. And we're going to allow all these overallocations. And I'm trying to see where these various pieces happen. Now, it looks like this particular constraint is only associated with this task way back up here. See how I've got these lines dropping out? So I can get done with this milestone. It's apparently not linked to these others. And so I've got to go back and try to get all of these in line to force them back to 11:13. I could pursue that method and probably resolve this and see where all the over allocations are happening. But what am I going to do with the over allocations? Let's try to see how that works. Let's go back over to, there are a couple of ways we can see this. Let's go back over to our resources for a minute. And in this case, I'm actually going to go to the resource usage. I could go there, or I could go to the resource graph. If I look at resource usage, I can see who's over allocated. And if I zoom to the project timescale, so entire project, I can see exactly when the over allocations are happening at this point. They're happening in October, and they're happening during what looks like a week when Mary and Yolanda would be working 112 hours. I can see exactly which tasks are involved. Nobody else is involved at the moment. But I want you to keep in mind the reason why others are not involved at the moment. Let's go back and take a look at that. If I go back to the Gantt chart and take a look, I can see that because the constraints on those milestones and final task did not force these others to move, there are no other over allocations. But really, all these other, everything needs to be finishing. All this stuff that's to the right of my 1113 is problematic. All of that's going to have to move. This one's going to be maybe a little easier moving this back, but because there's a little split slack here. But I'm going to see more over allocations ultimately. 112 hours. Now, let's go back to the resource sheet for a minute. Now, I mentioned that we can look at the resource graph as well. That's another way to see where my over allocations are happening. And again, it's handy, I can zoom here. I can zoom to the entire project, and I can go through my resources using the scroll bars down at the bottom here one by one. I can see, here's Fred, he's at 100, here's Naboke, Helmut, Mike, everything's looking good, Shalini, no problem, Arthur, Yolanda. Yolanda goes up to 200% here in October. Mary goes to 200%. So if I go to my resource sheet and I allow overtime, I can enable everything to look good again. So I can come up here and I can put in, say, 150%. This is how I can add overtime. It's not enough, obviously, because when I added the 150%, these two guys remained red. But what if I go in and put in 200%? Mary turns black, Yolanda turns black. So at this point, what I've learned is that in 2 specific weeks, maybe I can find temporary help from other people in the firm. Maybe I can hire in some outside labor. I'm seeing some sourcing issues that I'm going to have to deal with as the resource manager. Let's go back and try to force everything to finish on time. Now, if our constraints are right, maybe we can do this. So this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and we're going to level the entire project. But in doing that, I want to check my leveling options here. And I want to make sure that I level only within available slack. that's going to force it to get it done within those constraints that we set earlier. Now, if we did this right, our whole project is about to light up. And we're going to get a whole bunch of over allocations. I'm going to skip all on these. Voila. Sure enough, there they are. Okay, so what happened? Again, we can go through the same process. First thing I want to do is I want to go back to my Gantt chart and see if the Gantt chart forced everything to finish in time for our deadline. Sure did. In fact, at this point, everything is finishing next to each other. So end to end, right? As soon as possible. So because I turned on the option to level outside of available slack, it's saying if we put everything as fast as possible, starting back to back, this is how fast this project can get done. And now I would start dealing with my resource problem. So here I can go back, I can go to the resource graph, I can again zoom to the timeline. It's basically on the timeline, and I can see what amounts I'm dealing with. I can see in May I've got Fred at 300%, I've got Naboka at 200%, Helmet hits 300% 3 different weeks, Mike is at 200% a couple different weeks. As a project manager, having this kind of information right now allows me to look at my sourcing and see, have I got the ability to get people to cover those times? Are there some phantom hours in here that we really don't have, as much work as we said, 2 weeks, but really that's only part-time during those weeks. We really can do these tasks together. I would have discussions with my employees and see if we could actually get this done right now at this allocation level. Let's take a look too at some of our project reports. So there are some interesting things happening here. I've got some dashboards. And the first one I want to look at is the project overview. The overview is going to give us a sense of how things are going to work. It's got some nice defaults here. There's no progress yet. I can see when my milestones are due. I can see nothing is complete yet. This report is going to get more interesting as we have status. Let's go back in and take a look at our over-allocated resources. So instead of a dashboard, I'm going to go over to resources and I'm going to hit over-allocated resources. And all at once, I can see where it's happening. I can see the amount of over-allocation and when and who. So again, very useful. I've got up to 16 hours over-allocated in a given period, day period. And so now I can go back and start dealing with those problems. These are classic issues which project managers have to deal with, and so you can see Microsoft Project is making it easy for you to locate them. There's another interesting one, so we're going to go back over. There's the task cost overview report. So several of these different reports are customizable for your specific project context, and they can be copied and pasted, which is really nice. You can copy and paste this thing into Microsoft Word and then be able to manage it more effectively. We haven't saved our baseline yet. I'm seeing that on this report. So one of the things that I've learned just now is I need to go back and save my baseline. I think in the actual slides, I've told you to do that, but I didn't do it here in the video. Sorry about that. It won't have messed up anything yet. So I'm going to go ahead and set baseline and hit OK. I did put 200% of Mary and Yolanda into the baseline, though. That will be a slight difference between what you see if you're strictly following the PowerPoint slides. It'll make a little bit of a difference, not too much difference. So let's go back over and go back to the task cost overview, and now I'm seeing the baseline show up in my task cost overview. Otherwise, that line was not there earlier, and I've got a breakdown of how much it's going to cost and the remaining cost, etc., the variance. Very useful. If I move over, I can go to another piece. You may not have paid a lot of attention to the tracking Gantt before. I'm going to click on the tracking Gantt and zoom it to the time scale of the entire project. And I can see these little bars. Now, because I saved the baseline after clicking Level All, earlier we had a baseline change. If I had saved the baseline earlier, the bars would not all match because some of these tasks actually moved. And so I would see where the tasks originally were scheduled on the baseline and where they're now scheduled. Now, as a project manager, again, that's useful because I need to tell the people, I may want to tell the people whose tasks moved, hey, here's where your tasks went. There is, in fact, a report in Project for individuals that will tell them a list of all their tasks, when they begin and end, etc. If we were using Project Server, they could also log in and they would be able to see some of these pieces as well. Another thing I might want to do is I might want to see some of that cost data right here in the data table. I can do that by double-clicking up here, right-clicking, in this magical unmarked upper left corner square, rectangle rather, and choosing the summary table. So doing, I get a bunch of different information in this top table, which is handy for me because now I can see some interesting things about the different tasks, costs, progress. These different data tables up here can be very handy for you as you try to report on a project, understand its progress, etc. The labor becomes interesting as well. So if I go back over to the resource sheet, on the resource sheet I can actually do the same thing. I can get a resource summary. And if you notice on the slide on page 17 of the PDF, which I believe, if you're on the PowerPoints, is slide number 33, what you will see is that things are grouped by groups. So I can actually do that. I can go over to View, and I can click Group By and Resource Group. And when I do that, I now have a summary by resource group of the various resources. I can see that I have as a max of 600% being used on resource group 1 at one point, so triple time basically. Our filter machine hasn't been allocated at all. That's a problem. So I now, again, I'm double checking. I'm seeing, wait a minute, we're supposed to use the filter machine, but it hasn't been allocated. Okay, so now I want to go back and make sure that that gets put in. And it gets used during the produce test batch of wine task. So let's go back over to the Gantt chart. Let's go down and find produce test batch of wine. I'm going to double click that, go to the resources tab, and I'm going to see, here's the filter machine, and it's going to cost $200. There's that $200. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to skip all. And now the filter machine has been allocated. I've skipped all the leveling issues. Let's go back to the resource summary sheet and confirm that it is correct. And look at our filter machine. It's now at 200. It's blue, telling us that change has been accepted. Perfect. The type of resource, we're not seeing that. I can go ahead and put in the type column here. It's a cost resource. Sure enough. Good. Everything looks good. Now, let's make a budget. We want to manage this project and know that our budget is working. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a budget for the different types of resources. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to type in, we're going to budget by groups. So we're going to make a budget for group 1. And I want to go in here and put in a proper initial for this budget. So pay attention to that. The group here is going to be R1. I'm going to come across, and now I'm going to let this remain a work type. I'm going to go out here to the, it's going to be a little bit custom here. I'm going to add in a couple of columns. I'm going to add in the budget resource column, and I'm going to add in a column for the initials. And I'm going to make this a budget resource, and then I'm going to go ahead and put in here R1-B. And then I'm going to come in. Let's just see if we can get it to redisplay. The reason I want to redisplay right now is I want you to see that when I redisplay this budget resource after setting it as a budget resource, you'll notice that all these pieces in between that were earlier defaulted have now turned blank. As a budget resource, max, peak, standard rate, overtime, cost, all of that blanks out because it can't be set. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to have 3 more budget resources. So I'm going to go ahead and hit yes, yes, yes. And the bottom one, this is going to be a material resource, and this one's going to be a cost resource. And I'm going to go ahead and type in R2 budget. I'm putting in the word budget so that I can remember this is a budget resource. This is a shorthand method for making sure you don't confuse your resources when you label them. And it makes a big difference ultimately, because later on when you're trying to wire up the different pieces of your project plan, you want to easily be able to find the different pieces so that you don't get lost. So I like to do that. It's just for me, it's a best practice. I would suggest to you that you do it when you set things up yourself later on. Notice too, when we redisplayed the budget resource, because it was in a group, got grouped into its group. Okay, now you'll notice we can't actually add any of the hours. I can't type in any of these pieces directly. In fact, there's even a column called budgeted work over here, and we can't type there either. The reason we can't do that is that budgets have to be allocated first. So, what do? I just clicked save, so if you want, you can go ahead and control-click save, and notice when that happened, it went ahead and moved my resources. Let's go allocate our budget resources. Let's go to Task, go to Gantt Chart. This time I'm going to double-click. Budget resources can only be allocated to the project summary task, line 0. So this time I'm going to double-click up here on this task. I'm going to go under Resources, and I'm going to select my budget resources. This is easy because I went ahead and put the word budget in those resources earlier, which makes it a little easier to go ahead and allocate them at this point. So let's go ahead and grab them all. We've got them all. I'm going to hit OK. Skip all again. Let's take a look. And I've got them in there, but they don't have any units associated with them. Now, you may notice it's a little bit of a pain. I can't actually type anything in over here again. I have to assign usage to these resources. Now, how much am I going to assign? Let's go back to our resource sheet. And let's remember that we have 2,440 hours of Group 1 and 3,830 hours of Group 2. There is a resource usage display. And if I've got my resources properly budgeted, then I will see now they've been allocated. I can add this budgeted work and budget cost. I can actually put that in there now, and in the italics location I can actually type in my budget. So now I can put in 3880, 2440. I can put in my material budget. So my material budget, do you remember? Did you see what my material budget was? This is going to get a little tricky because my material budget is basically, it's not by hours. Unfortunately, we don't really have a good, a good method for that with the materials. You'll see how that comes up later. But in any case, we can put in a 2 there because we're going to use materials twice. And so we'll put that in, and then we're going to have a cost of 200. All right, I've set up my budgeting. And now if I go back and take a look at my project under the Gantt chart, I will see, sure enough, I've got my resource initials showing up. If I turn on the summary and I turn on the budget cost, budget work, I can see my budget is showing up, and I can see that it matches the expected amount of work here. One of the confusing pieces you might notice is that the budget cost is only for the budget resources. This is the total labor cost. And so I've got a little bit more to do in terms of remaining cost, etc. Some of those things we're going to look at in exercise E. Okay, that's it for now. Hopefully you've followed along, you've gotten to this point, and believe it or not, you are way ahead of just about everybody else in the Microsoft project world. We're going to add some status and changes in the next exercise and see how we can use Microsoft Project as status comes in.